Parents, the following program is intended for people over the age of 13. If your kids are younger than that, please use the YouTube Kids app.
Welcome to Scary Stories, the channel that tells you scary stories.
Peter Bernard's Scary Stories for Adults.
Welcome to Scary Stories NYC. I'm your old pal Bigfoot. Here's a brand new story for a Sunday in this month of agonizing April. We're going to attempt to do at least one story per day for every day. Some of them may get deleted later to be included in best of episodes, but the idea is to try to help you guys distract yourself when you need a break from the seriousness. It might be a small way to help, but it's the only way we know. Speaking of help, this story's executive producer is Missy H. Thank you, Missy. We couldn't do it without you. If you would like to become a Scary Stories executive producer like the one and only Missy H, just join our affordable paid subscribers club at peterbernard.com. You get something like 7 hours of secret uncensored scary stories just for joining, plus a new secret uncensored story each Sunday. But if you can't afford it, liking, subscribing, and telling your friends about our videos also all helps us out a great deal. Speaking of which, it's about time we got around to our story. I hope you can get comfortable and warm and dry and safe, and then dim the light and prepare for a really creepy Dogman story set in the night in the middle of a forest that no man has a right to be in after dark. This is the kind of place where if the Dogman doesn't get you, any number of other things might. Going there at night is like deliberately asking for a nightmare, but sometimes charity and goodwill will cause us to place ourselves in danger in order to help others. That's exactly the circumstance that led today's story submitter into the situation where he saw far too close in front of him. Dogman in my headlights. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I have an annoying hermit uncle who claims he hates everybody, but is constantly asking all of us for help. Let's call him Uncle Herman the Hermit, just because we can. I had hardly been on his property 2 or 3 times in my entire life, but since this crisis thing hit recently, he's been calling me up and demanding I go get supplies for him. In the last month, I think I've been out there 7 times, but I'm only going during the daytime hours from now on. When I went there at night, I found his place is infested with Dogman. Or at least one. I think in the case of Dogman, one is an infestation. This crazy brother of my father is always bragging about how he lives off the grid, but he's got pirated internet, cable, and whatever else is out there. He even has a TikTok account. He's as wired in as a teenager. The only grid he's off of is the one where you pay for your own stuff that you're using. I guess I wouldn't actually have such a huge problem with any of this, but Uncle Herman is really a jerk about all of it. He acts like he's better than you. In fact, he doesn't just act like it. He'll come out and tell you that you're an idiot, and he's smarter than you, more knowledgeable than you, more experienced than you, and however else he could possibly be better. And he uses a lot of foul language, which you can tell he thinks makes him look cool, but it doesn't. It's as lame as somebody's mom trying to curse. It's just cringe and embarrassment mixed with someone personally abusing you. He makes it hard to be nice to him, harder to like him. That's all I can say. Uncle Herman the Annoying Hermit lives on land just southwest of Saginaw, Michigan that I'm not even sure he legally owns. It's a bit complicated getting there, involving driving down a green lawn to get to a closed back road, then a dirt path, which ends, followed by 2 tire trails cut into the dirt kind of like cart ruts, with grass growing in the middle. It's an hour drive from my place to the green lawn and another 25 minutes driving in places I'm pretty sure I'm not supposed to be, just to reach his door. Uncle Herman had really been pushing me and I was losing patience with him. I told him I wanted him to make a list of what he needed for 2 weeks, and I would then make 2 trips out per month. He started screaming that I was stressing him out, and that stress inhibits the human immune system. He said that qualifies as attempted homicide in the current climate, and started pointing at me and shouting, "J'accuse." People think he's funny when I tell them these stories, but the friends I have, who have met him for real, told me they never want to meet him again. Uncle Herman is the kind of guy who will go out of his way to make sure he's hurt your feelings somehow. So, the event that really made me put my foot down with my uncle was the time he called me up after it was dark out already, and told me he needed me to pick him up some liquor and some porn. I told him to get his own booze and boobs, and he went off on one of his tirades, screaming on the phone that he was going to dox me on Twitter and call the cops to tell them that he's an at-risk senior citizen that is being put at risk by me. I took pity on the old jerk, and I told him I'd make a drive out to him that night. I picked up some beer for him, it was all I could find, and I decided I would lend him my Amazon Fire tablet for his entertainment. I don't even know where to buy porn. What does that mean anymore, to buy porn? My uncle is from another time. So, I was falling asleep as I was driving that night, following the usual path through the woods to get to my annoying uncle. Since it had rained the night before, the path was a bit muddy and wet in parts, and that served to wake me up a bit. It was slippery and I almost lost control a couple of times. It was while driving under tree cover on that dark night, making my way down that part of the path with grass growing down the center of the road, that I saw the thing for the first time. I had heard my parents talk about the boogeyman that lived on my uncle's property, but I didn't think they meant it literally. I always just assumed they were making up the story of a monster living there where he was, in order to have an excuse why we would almost never visit him. I didn't feel like we needed any excuse other than that he was a mean, selfish, hurtful creep, and I told them so. They told me I didn't understand, and that they hoped I would never have to. The instant I saw that thing on the dirt in front of me blocking the path, I knew that my parents had merely been speaking in literal terms. There, in front of me, was an actual real-life boogeyman. It looked like something prehistoric and something savage. It looked untamed. It looked angry. It stood there in a manner very similar to that of a bear, but its legs were longer, chest wider, hips thinner. It was tall enough that the top of its head was not lit by my headlights very clearly at first, and my eyes struggled to make sense of its face. I didn't understand its nose or its mouth, as they didn't seem human, or even ape-like. The images I was seeing literally made no sense to me until they snapped into place in an instant, and I understood. This creature was not human, and it was not one of the great apes. It was something far closer to a werewolf, at least in appearance. The nose was much like a shortened dog nose. Its mouth was like that of a dog, with a cleft in the center of the upper lip. Yet, the face was taller than a dog's head or a wolf's head might normally be. It was some kind of mix between a humanoid creature and a dog creature. It dropped to all fours, and with only a step or two, its face was in my windshield, and it was barking at me. When I realized that it was leaning its head down to be at my eye level even when it was down on all fours, I felt a different and deeper kind of fear than I've ever felt before in my life. I might not make it out of this situation, I thought. The dog-headed ape man might be able to get into my car and get at me. As soon as that idea hit my brain, I panicked. Leaning down hard on the car horn, I also screamed at the top of my lungs in abject fear. The sudden noise surprised the dogman, who took a few steps back away from the hood of my car and regarded the vehicle with alarm and curiosity. I got an idea in my head, and I put the car in reverse, backing up slowly as the dogman stood there on all fours, watching. Then I threw it into gear and I hit the gas pedal, beeping the horn as loud as I could as I drove the car as quickly as I could directly at the dogman, praying that it had the common sense to get out of the way. I drove forward, wondering if this plan would work, or if this was the stupidest thing I had ever done. Of course, even if it did work, that might not rule out the second thing. I had all of maybe 2 or 3 seconds to look at the creature, really see it, fully lit up, standing perfectly still, like a deer in the headlights. It was much more lightly colored than I had ever expected Dogman to be, if I ever were to see one. The ears were way up on top and were short, almost more like cat ears than dog ears. If you know the history of the cartoon character Batman, this Dogman had the 1960s shorter bat ears, and way up on top just like Batman. Its eyes also glowed like Batman, but a yellow color, at least when it was in my headlights. The creature reared back and was once again on its hind legs. I could no longer see all of it, but I could see that the underbelly of the monster was even lighter than the sides and the appendages. There were parts where the fur resembled that of a wolf almost exactly, and other areas where it reminded me of an Alaskan husky. It was so tall, especially on its hind legs, that it was absolutely monstrous. Its legs were not so tall, though, that I would be able to drive under them like an arch. I was going to slam right into that thing, and I wondered if my car and I would come out worse than the Dogman for having met. At the very last second, the creature avoided my onrushing vehicle, and I found myself hurtling forward in the dark on the slippery and muddy path. Banging into the raised grass in the middle was a no-no, as I had already learned. It was even more slippery than the muddy dirt. I had to steer the car like I was in a video game, focusing on keeping the 2 wheels each in the cart rut dirt paths, and hope that I had left the creature behind me for good. I noticed that my hands were shaking and I focused on my breathing. When I feel like panicking, I try to stay in the moment and just do what I need to do right now. In this case, I was entirely concentrated on keeping the car going exactly where it needed to go. After succeeding at this for some time, and hearing no return of the Dogman from behind me, I breathed a deep breath of relief, and I began to calm myself down a little bit. Bam! The creature elbowed or shouldered my vehicle on the right, then it ran back into the woods. The Dogman was able to run far faster than I was willing to drive my car on that night. Bam! Now I was hit into on my left, and I saw the monster run back into the woods on the left. How could he have come around to the other side so quickly? He was capable of running rings around me, and he was showing this off. Bam! I felt the Dogman hit the car's right side and speed off into the underbrush again. I screamed at him to stop it and leave me alone. I was nearly at my uncle's place, and I was freaking completely out. I parked the car as close to his front door as I could manage. I grabbed his case of beer out of the back seat, and I ran to that door, banging on it and screaming at him to please let me in. I looked around behind me, and I didn't see the Dogman anywhere. But I knew he was out there. Someplace. How close would he be willing to come to my uncle's house? After what seemed like a decade, Uncle Herman opened the door and said something rude to me. I don't remember what. I pushed past him and shouted at him to close and lock the door behind him. I wasn't messing around. I needed him to lock that door so I could exist for a minute or two without feeling I might be torn apart by a man-eating predator at any second. "Where's my porn?" he started badgering me. I handed him the Amazon Fire. "What in hell am I going to do with this?" he asked me. "I don't know," I responded. "Look up sexy pictures on the internet, man. Use your imagination." He started getting cranky that I got him beer when he had requested hard liquor, but I interrupted him and told him about the light-colored, upright-walking dire wolf I had encountered on the way in. I asked him what he knew about that wolf creature, and he just laughed. He laughed for some time, no matter what I said. It dawned on me that I wasn't even sure what part of any of this he found so funny. "Boo-hoo-hoo," he shouted at me, laughing and pretending to cry. "Boo-hoo-hoo. Widow baby want to stay here for the night because he's afraid of widow doggy?" I told him to shut up, but he was incapable of it. "I can get a teddy bear and a bottle for the baby if you want." His cruel laughter got me so angry. If this is my family, who needs enemies? This is someone who's supposed to be my flesh and blood? I looked him in the eye, and I asked him outright if he had seen this monster. He just laughed. I wanted to know what he knew about the creature so that I could understand if there were any safe way to make it out of the area before the sun came up. I asked him one more time if he knew the monster I was referring to, the giant man thing with the head of some kind of a devil dog, the creature that had blocked my path and almost prevented me from bringing him his beer. I wish he had blocked you from bringing me that beer I never asked for, because then I wouldn't have to be lectured by some idiot relative of my brother's. "I'm not a relative of your brother," I snarled at him. "I'm your brother's son, you drunken moron." That was it. He erupted into full incoherent shouting glory, and I knew nothing reasonable or intelligent was going to happen in that house on that night. I grabbed my coat and left, pulling it on as I walked to my car. "All right, Dogman," I called out to the darkness. "All I want is safe passage. I don't think that's too much to ask. You don't want to eat me. My meat is too tough to chew." I opened my car door. I got ready to get back inside, and I looked around at the forest. I'm not sure, but I guess I was waiting to listen for any response. I didn't get any that I noticed or understood, so I said one more thing. "If you leave me alone, I'll leave you alone. If you mess with me, I'll mess with you." Then I got into the car, slammed the door, and turned the key in the ignition, which did not start. So I tried it a second time and a third time, but it chugged back to life on the fourth try. Not quite a dramatic exit, but it would have to do. I remember reading a book about how to withstand great cold and not suffer any major consequences. It was about using your mind as a wedge to deal with things that are normally too much for your body to handle. As I began driving away from my crazy uncle's house that night, I felt so cold inside because of how scared I was. It might have been 95 degrees in that car, and I still would have been shivering. Maybe my uncle was right to laugh at me. I was genuinely afraid in that moment because of a big dog. I told myself that in my head, and I had a minor internal chuckle. Silly me. Scared of a dog. I'm locked in a car with the windows sealed. I double-checked that. Yes, they're sealed. Probably the giant dog thing wouldn't be able to break in. He probably wouldn't even try. I mean, it was all a bluff. Dogs like to scare you off their turf, that's all. It's nature. Just because this dog is freakishly larger than any dog should be, and just because he stands on his hind legs like a man, didn't mean it wasn't just a dog trying to scare me off its turf. And since now I was in the process of attempting to leave its turf, it might just leave me alone. It might already have moved on. Maybe it wasn't even in the area any longer. Bark, 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 bark. He was in my left ear, his giant face outside my driver's seat window. Far too large for me to make out more than the nose and the front fangs, and the way it was steaming up my window from the outside. I stepped down on the gas and I screamed a whole lot. I'm not sure how my heart kept beating. It was the single scariest and least expected jump scare that ever happened to me in real life. I saw the Dogman racing after me in my rearview mirrors, and I tried to get my car going a bit faster. It was too hard to steer it if I drove any faster, especially because going this way, it was almost all downhill. I wanted so badly to get out of there, but I just physically wasn't a good enough driver to handle it in the mud at any higher speeds. I was crying, which made it harder to see, and I was certain that the Dogman was going to catch up to me when we made it to the open clearing. That's the part of the road which is flat dirt in the middle of a large open field. It isn't so hard to navigate, and the harder packed dirt isn't as slippery. The tree cover disappeared behind us, and we were in the open field. I slowly, steadily accelerated, and I found I was still able to maneuver the car safely. Now I needed to figure out where the Dogman was, and how much space was between us before knowing what we needed to do next. I say we, as in me, myself, and I. I saw no Dogman in any mirror. I turned my head to look back toward the forest, and I saw it nowhere. Panicking, I scanned around in front of us and to either side. My heart was pounding. Could it be on the roof? I didn't remember hearing it land up there, and the car didn't seem to be weighted down. Could the beast have taken a shortcut? Might it be in the woods in front of me someplace, getting ready to ambush? I drove, panicked, like a mental patient, the entire way. But I made it back to my home. As I said before, I will never go back to that place at night. I shouldn't even go there during the day, but I don't want to feel guilty if that old creepy hermit starves to death. He is my father's brother, after all. It means something to me, even if it doesn't mean anything to him. I'm willing to make 2 food and emergency supply deliveries per month to his home. Both shipments happen early enough that I can get home by 1 or 2 in the afternoon. I need to stick to these rules, because my heart could not stand ever again seeing Dogman in my headlights.
My, what a nice spring evening. Wow, whatever made that howl sure sounded close. It's amazing how even the prettiest spring sunset can turn scary when there's a chance that the Dogman may be near. I'm Madeline Starr, and I'll be hosting the Dogman Scary Springtime Special right here on Scary Stories NYC. And now, here's another scary Dogman story.
Hey, it's me, Henry Lee Dogman, here to thank those of you who support all of us here at Scary Stories NYC. It really helps us if you click like, and if you forward our videos or leave cool comments. If you can, it helps us even more when you let us share our 25-episode and growing collection of uncensored, scary Dogman stories with you by becoming a paid subscriber at peterbernard.com. That's right. Join our monthly club and get 25 stories right off the bat, each of them wilder than what we're allowed to tell you on this channel. Then, each Sunday, get another new scary story, usually a Dogman story, but always uncensored and secret, available nowhere else on the planet. Please consider joining us today at peterbernard.com and keep the scary stories coming. Thanks, everyone.
Come back for more scary stories.